trying to teach something, it really makes you think, and you've got to think through like step by step how to explain this to someone in a way that like they can understand without the huge breadth of knowledge that you might have behind it, right? So like I can give someone a 60-second explanation on shaders, and chances are I get it wrong or like they don't understand because I'm pulling on so much pre-knowledge that I need to break it down to the point where like they can actually understand it. Given like a few hours to think through, maybe I could come up with a good 60-second explanation, but like it's very
Hello, welcome to Metaverse Degen. I'm Lion.
I'm Old Man Raptor, and we got one hell of a guest list, and that is, I said guest list? What the fuck? Guest is Jesus fucking Christ.
Hi, I'm Zekk.
Nice to meet you, Zekk. Thank you for coming on. It's an absolute honor to have you on and get to meet you. So thank you.
Yes. It's great to have you here, Zach.
Thank you for having me.
Ooh. So what are you most known for, and how'd you get started with VRChat and everything else?
So I guess I'd be most known for like shaders and prefabs. I started in 2018. However, I took like a big gap. I think that's common for a lot of people. So back in 2018, I was introduced by a friend to the game, like an IRL friend, and I played for like maybe three times during the whole like Knuckles craze. And then I took about like a few years of a gap and came back in 2022. And I got back into the game because of the creative elements of it. Like I saw that you could make your own stuff in Unity, and that interested me a lot. And so I started doing that, and then spiraled, and here we are.
Wow. So did you have any experience building stuff with Unity and shaders before VRChat, or was VRChat your first experience with that kind of stuff?
So I'm a programmer for lifetime programmer, right? Like I've been doing that type of stuff for as long as I can remember, but I had no experience with Unity before VRChat. I just saw it and was like, wow, that looks really fun. I want to be able to do that. And so I guess like coming off of similar games, what like got me sort of right back into it was I was actually watching some like Gary's Mod videos and looking at all the creation stuff in there, and then like it sort of spiraled, and eventually I ended up watching like a VRChat video, and here I am. So yeah, I had no former experience, never touched a shader ever, and yeah.
Oh, well,
I got a question.
Okay, fair.
Gotta be quick. Gotta be quick, man. Gotta be quick. Since you said you just, when you first started and stuff like this, what was the weirdest thing you ever saw in VR?
I guess outside of like the normal stuff that like is just like really wacky and like people like running after other people, I don't know if I could put like a specific pin on like that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I do remember being really surprised by like the first time I saw like one of those screen space effects, like distortion ones where they like pull your screen away and like roll you around, and at the time I had no clue what safety settings were. I don't even remember if there were safety settings, but that just sort of blew me away and made me very motion sick.
Oh yeah, that'd fuck you. Oh my god, I could imagine that one. Holy shit, it'd be like somebody rattling your cage or spinning you in a hamster ball. I don't know where I come up with that idea.
I don't know. It's not like one of your old avatars has a hamster ball on it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you had prior experience as a programmer. What got you into programming, and what were some of your first projects?
Oh, okay. So that's an easy one, and I think a lot of people like sort of in my age range generation have a similar answer, which is Minecraft modding. I wanted to mod Minecraft so bad, and so that got me interested in programming, and then I began like picking up other stuff. Obviously, like a lot of people, I had like a reality check. Like you don't just jump straight into modding Minecraft. And so a few years later, I would get to do Minecraft mods, but yeah, that was like what got me into it, and then since then it's just been like something that I really enjoy doing.
Oh, so what kinds of languages did you start with modding Minecraft, and what kinds of mods were you looking to make?
So Minecraft is, or at the time it was all Java, and so Java like was what I was interested in. But again, like I said, you normally don't like. I'm sure there's some people who have started just straight up like modding Minecraft, but I started with very first language. I think this is the case for a lot of people. I think it's even taught in some schools now was Scratch, right? Just to get familiar with it. And then I think I went Python, Java, and since then I've learned like a whole bunch of other assorted languages. Like it becomes less about the language and more about like the structure after a while.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh, how long did it take you to pick that up in order to start getting programming? And yeah, I'll start with that.
Yeah. Oh, years and years. I think like it's such a fuzzy timeline because this is like like when I started like getting interested in this when I was like pretty much little, right? Like I'm trying to think. I probably started around like eight or 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember exactly. So like it's fuzzy, but yeah, and it's been like 12, 13 years about
Wow.
then for programming experience. So yeah.
Wow, that's an impressive thing to pick up for an 8-year-old, I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I had a lot of help. A lot of help from especially like my parents, stuff like that. Getting me into it, supporting me, like knowing what resources to look at. Because one of my parents does this for work, so they
Oh,
were
wow.
able to help me like get in there.
Oh, wow. So during that timeline between like when you started and when you got into VRChat, what were some of your favorite projects from that time?
Um, oh god, mostly miscellaneous like Minecraft mod stuff. Um, I don't I don't think I ever released anything, but I made a lot of stuff for myself to play around with, and um, trying to think of like a standout project. Honestly, a lot of my projects were more academic, because like you end up in like the academia pathway eventually. I take like programming classes in high school, and then I'm now in college, almost done with college for computer science. So just how it rolls.
Wow. So what were some of your first projects leading into VRChat then, since you have that knowledge base to pull from when you came in here? What kinds of things did you start building?
So I think I started out where a lot of people start out, which is just like you've got a pre-made avatar, you put it in Unity, you start playing around with like objects and game objects and animator stuff. Learn how to like merge stuff. Now we have like VRC Fury makes it really easy, but back then like you have to use like the I think Avatar 3.0 had just launched when I started getting into it, so it was like 3.0 tools by VR Labs. I forget the exact name. Let you like merge animators and stuff like that. And so my first big love was spring joints. I wanted to like make my own spring joints and figure out how they worked, which I think was the first like big project I did. And then for shaders, I believe I one of the first projects I actually made was like an FPS graph that like shows your FPS, and it's local to each person. And that was when I like that at that point I realized like wow, there's a lot of stuff that can be done with shaders even though we can't directly like program on an avatar. Like this is as close as we're going to get, and there's a ton of stuff that can be done here. And so that was like that was my first project I think that I like publicly released at all. It's still on my GitHub, I think.
Oh, wow. So how many projects have you released since you've entered VRChat and started programming and making shaders and stuff?
So actually released, I think it can still be counted on two hands. I don't have an exact number that I can remember. A lot of stuff ends up sitting in my like gremlin shader vault where like I made something cool for myself and I just like either never got around to polishing and releasing it, or it's not something that's like performant enough for like general use, right? A lot of times I'll make something that like is just for me in a private world because it's going to drop me to like 5 FPS, right? Stuff like that. But yeah, like overall projects, I think I have like somewhere close to like the 60 to 70 folder range in my like folder that I put all my projects that are like whether released or not, and each one of those could have like X number of like iterations or changes or stuff. So it's been a lot. I've done a lot of stuff in VRChat.
Oh wow. So it how is the learning curve for making stuff here in VRChat versus Minecraft mods, which you started with?
It's funny because like in a lot of ways, when I started like the Minecraft modding stuff, it was very raw and like unexplored. Like you had to figure out how to like set up Gradle. I remember vividly like spending hours like trawling through stuff and like even with guidance, like trying to figure out how to set that stuff up. Um, and so it's almost very similar, right? Like there isn't a very good rule book for VR chat. Like this is going to work, this isn't going to work. Like what's going to work in VR. There are some great resources, especially for shaders now, that like didn't exist, or they existed like right around the time that I started, which was really great because it meant that I didn't have to like relearn a lot of tricks and a lot of stuff like that. Just a few off the top of my head, like shader tricks, the shader knowledge repo. All that's on GitHub, can be found there. And those resources like show a lot of the tricks that sort of you don't really figure out without seeing it or knowing like a lot more in the field. So yeah, saved a lot of time looking at those.
Wow. So when you're for the projects you release, like the one you've released very recently that I saw that I saw on Twitter, is what made me reach out to you, is the one where you pick your feet up and you have platforms coming up under your feet. When you release projects, is there any inspirations for when you create those things, or is it just something that's on the spur of the moment?
Yeah, so the platform thing isn't quite released, although I don't know your upload schedule. It might be released by the time this is out. But almost everything that I make and release starts as something that like I want, or like a shower thought, or like something where I'm talking with friends and they're like, "Oh, what about this?" Right? So I definitely have like a lot of pop culture inspiration, obviously, because there's a ton of like movies and video games and even books that like have cool stuff in them that we can do in VR chat. It just takes fiddling around with it. So yeah, that's like most stuff starts out as stuff as where I'm like, yeah, I want that, right? And I make it. And then the reason why a lot of stuff like doesn't get past that point is because the polish is what I consider like work, right? Everything else up to the polish stage is just like playing around, having fun. It's like it's almost an addiction. I'd say it was a problem if I didn't manage to like turn this somewhat into like a business. It would definitely have been a problem. So yeah.
Okay.
So that.
Ooh. So what kind of projects have you released so far, may I ask, for purchase, and what brought those projects about?
So first few projects were eye shaders. Mostly because that was one of like my interests, like when I first got into this was, oh, I want to make an eye shader. And so that was mainly like inspired by there's another creator, I think they go by Dope Stuff on their like platforms, like Booth and stuff, but I think their name is Doppel. And so they put out eye shaders and I kept seeing those and I was like, oh, that's really cool, I want to make an eye shader. And so I started with something pretty simple, and then I had like friends, they knew who they are, love you guys, start asking me like, hey, can I get this anywhere? Like, can I buy this from you? And so that really set up in my head like, wait, there are people who might actually want to buy this from me, right? Buy stuff that I make for VR chat. And so I put that one up. It got like 9 sales. It's still like barely any sales, right? But that sort of kickstarted it in my head, and the next product did much better, and so on and so forth. So the first few were eye shaders, and then I had trying to think. After that, I think I did some like miscellaneous like Halo stuff. Not like Halo the game, like Halo like goes over your head Halo. And then I eventually came around to like my current arc, right, where I did the hologram projector and I posted that on Twitter and that blew up and that like took everything to a whole different dimension for me. And since then I've only released the after images effects, script thing, setup scripts. And the next thing will probably be the platform. But yeah.
Oh wow.
Sort of.
So how is when you first started putting your items up for sale, has that changed your view of programming and making stuff for VRChat at all, or did it stay relatively the same?
Yeah, I think like because everything I make starts as something that I want, right? I don't think it changed my outlook a ton. Like when I make something, typically it's not with like, oh, this will do amazing. Like, it's typically something that I want, and then later I realize, wait, like if I want it, someone else has to want this, right? And then like if I post a demo on Twitter and it does really well, then like obviously other people want it. So I don't think it's like particularly changed my outlook. I do think it's changed my outlook on like the whole like programming, go like get a CS degree, work for like a company for your life, right? It showed me that there is another path, and while I still think like I will end up like finishing out my degree and going and working like a 9 to 5, it has created a situation where like wow, like if I wanted to, maybe I could pursue a creative path, or at least on the side, pursue a creative path, and maybe it will blow up into a full-time job
Oh,
someday.
okay. So with the early releases being the eye shaders, what is the process of creating an eye shader like, and how is that different from some of your projects that followed suit afterwards?
Yeah, so eye shaders, it's funny because like as I developed like as a creator, I realized that like a lot of my insistence on doing like eye shaders as shaders had more to do with like its interest to me than its actual intrinsic like they're cool, but they aren't necessarily any more cool than like someone's really nicely painted eye texture, for example, right?
Hmm.
And so the eye shaders typically start with like just a normal, like you got to make a circle, right? Circle is a mesh. So you got your circle, and then you start with like vignettes to get it nice and like looking like it's a nice circle. It's the best way I can describe it. And then typically I'll either have some inspiration or I'll just play around with shapes. So for shaders, we have something called SDFs, signed distance fields. And they're like a function that you put in a position in like 2D space, and it says like how far am I from like a particular line, I guess the best way, which is the boundary for that shape. So for circles, it's really simple when you think about it, just like how far am I like from a point, right? And if you know you're like 2 meters from a point, let's say, then that 2 meters from a point will be the same around that point at every position, right? And so you can say, okay, if I'm at 2 meters, like in a very basic sense with like an if statement, you could say like, if I'm less than 2 meters away from a point, this pixel is like purple, right? And then I've got a circle, purple circle. And so there are a bunch of these functions, and especially like ones that have already been documented and figured out by people. There's a whole repository by I don't want to mispronounce their name. I'm just going to call them IQ on their website. And if you look up IQ SDF, you'll find them. And those are like pre-made SDFs available for anyone. Most of them are under MIT or like a general license. And so yeah, it's just like playing with shapes, seeing what works. Sometimes like the audio wave eyes, which I made, which are like audio linked, and they have like an audio linked bit. That came about because I just had like a line, and I tried like distorting it based on the audio link texture. And I was like, wow, that looks really good. I'm gonna do that, right? And it's a very iterative process. Like I'll start with something, and in a few hours it'll look completely different. But the whole idea is to keep moving towards something that like looks better, right? And since that's one of the reasons I will say that I moved away from them as much, is because they are a very long iterative process. Whereas more recently, like I think of something, I have an idea in my head, and like I start out with that idea and I end up with that idea. And it's sometimes more self-contained. So I'd say that's the only big difference. Um, they're a little bit constricted, or constrictive, I would say, because it's all in a shader, like really quickly, like has to render in time, so to say. And so it does have a little bit of a restrictive quality, and I like working with prefabs and other stuff more because it's less restrictive.
Okay. So after that, you said you worked on Halos and then a hologram projector they said took things off. What led you into those projects, and how have they changed how you do things and how sales went?
Yeah, so the hologram projector, um, I saw I want to say it was a video at some point of someone doing like a dissolve that looked really clean, where it like dissolved away like as if the object was projected, right? And I was like, wow, that looks really cool. I think I know how I might do that, right? And so I went and tried like the method that I thought would work, and it worked, and I was like playing around with it. And I just showed it to a few friends, and they were like, there's that trick that you talked about previously, which is using point lights to get like a position in space. Why don't you like make it go to that position? Right? And so I tried that, and I was like, wow, that looks really cool. I set it up on my avatar, so that like people could grab it. Friends were playing around with it. Other people in public lobbies were playing around with it. And finally I was like, okay, like clearly this is something that I think is cool. Other people think is cool. Let me finish this up. Let me polish this up. And so I polished it up. And really, when I said like it changed the game for me, I think it changed the game in that I sort of discovered Twitter. So for most like sellers of avatars and assets and stuff, I'd say almost all of my traffic came from posting in Discords. Lots of Discords have like a marketplace channel, at least for like Western avatar sellers. And so I'd post in a marketplace channel, and like people might see it there, and maybe you'd get like a few hundred people that see it on like the first day, and it spirals a bit, and then like it settles down, right? Because not a lot of people like look up in those channels. And if you don't break through like the onto like any of Gumroad's like front page or trending or anything like that, then it like slows down significantly. But I had an idea from seeing a few of my friends do it that I could try like a Twitter giveaway. Like, hey, I'll give away like a few copies of this to people if you do like the follow retweet thing. That's the word I was looking for. And so that like I did not expect the response that would get. It like flew farther than like I had ever expected before, and seeing so many people like interested in it and commenting like, oh my god, that's so cool, like I'm going to get it. And obviously that reflects in sales. Like you see your numbers explode when something goes semi-viral, or viral like in comparison to what you've previously done. And so that redefined my like how I looked at this, right? Like before it was, oh, this is cool, I can make a few bucks doing this, like just on the side for fun, to oh wow, like if I was able to do this semi-consistently, then like it could be a full-time career, right? And then I went on hiatus for 8 months, and now we're back. Yeah.
Oh. Would you mind showing us the
Definitely
avatar
not.
that went semi-viral, may I ask? If you still have it?
Yeah, I should still have it uploaded. Let me see if I can find it. I have to scroll way down, or I should have a Varun. Let's see. I think this one. Yeah. Yeah. That just uses the hologram for my ears.
Yeah, I've seen that around
and
a lot.
I think the thing that really caught people off guard is because it's all shader based, like you can do a lot. So if you like grab this and pull it away, my ears like disappear, for example. And so there's like there's stuff like that you can do that I don't think like you could do it using like contacts, but it would be a lot harder to do than just in the shader where I know where this is, I know where each like pixel on my ear is, so I can say if it's beyond a certain distance, like fade it out, disappear. So
Oh,
yeah.
wow. So what initially spurred up this project with the hologram that you made? Like
Mhm.
what made you want to, well, you already explained this earlier. Never mind. Ignore the question entirely.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, God.
Oh, wait, Mr. Raptor. There you are. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
So, did you expect did did you expect at all that kind of response from people when you showed people and went onto Twitter and it went as viral as it did? Did you expect any of that attention?
So I, I would be lying if I said I didn't expect it to some extent, just because I knew the formula, right? Like I had seen other creators do similar things and saw the response they got, right? And so I knew that if things like went the way that it did for other creators, than it would for my thing as well. So like in some ways it was premeditated, but at the same time, like you never really expect it until it happens, right? Like you can expect it in your head and be like, yeah, like this will probably work, but until it like actually works, like you don't see that. So yeah.
Okay. Now, did once you released it and got that experience, is that going to change how you advertise or do things from here on after you had that dip in the water, one would say?
Definitely like I'd say like it's absolutely going to change how I do things going forward and has changed things going forward. For one, I think I found now that like it's very valuable for me to try things first and like make something I like, right, and then post it on Twitter and see if other people like it too. It helps like sieve through some of the ideas I have and whether something will be things or like if a product is something that other people will enjoy, right, and purchase. And so for example, like the Halos that I put out, like I really enjoyed them, but they didn't have as much success like as a product as a lot of other stuff. And I realized later that like one, the market for them is kind of like saturated. There's a lot of good Halos out there. But two, like when I would post it on Twitter, even with like a repost later, like, ooh, look, I still love this effect, right? I actually specifically said that for one. It didn't get a lot of attention. And so that like put it together in my head like, okay, so clearly like people don't like this kind of thing as much, right? It sort of built up a little bit of an algorithm brain in my head for like I'm gonna play to the algorithm a little bit, like because I don't think before that point I don't really think I was that kind of person, if that makes sense. Like I didn't really think about the algorithm and like, oh, are people gonna like this? I was just interested in putting it out, right? After that, I think I changed a little bit in that now I do sort of care, like, if I'm going to go through the effort to, like, clean this up, polish it for sale, is this something that other people are going to like? And I would say that's, like, a good middle ground for me because it lets me protect my, like, creative, like, this is something I want to make for me while also being a, like, reasonable and, like a fair middle ground where I'm not wasting time doing stuff, right, that others won't enjoy. If that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. So, with I'll ask you a bit of a weird dual-layer question, but I'm more or less curious. How is something you want to make for yourself would be different for something you make for people to purchase? May I ask? May I ask, is there a difference in the product itself specifically, or is it about the same thing? Whoa, what are you doing here? This is wild.
What are you doing here?
I was here to remind these guys of something. What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you going to remind them about, Lion? I wanted to remind them about something too.
By the way, did you have fun at pjkt or Vrchat this year? Is there another convention that you're looking forward, but it's kind of not the season? Well, there's one coming up for Halloween that would be definitely down your alley if you're into spooky, scary stuff as well, which is HorrorCon, which is October 26th and 27th this year. So you should definitely go. See booze, people make stuff here in VR. Lots of crazy stuff for you to go check out.
There's also going to be DJs as well as many different worlds and events, from panels to amazing things along the way. You'll have to check it out. It is a 2-day event, like Lion said, October 26th and 27th. Make sure to be there. Go down in the description, discord.gg/pjkt, and also HorrorCon's Discord will also be down there as well. Go check it out. It'll be an amazing time. You'll probably see us there. There's a lot of amazing people, from horror creators to world creators of the horror genre, all sorts of stuff. You don't want to miss it.
Not at all. Go down the description. Everything you need to know to find out where to go to attend is right down below in the Hoobly What's a Thingy down there. So sorry to interrupt your current viewing pleasure. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of whoever the guest is at this moment. I don't know who it is.
There's a lot. There's going to be a lot. We'll see you at HorrorCon. Woo!
See you at HorrorCon.
You know, that's like really interesting because I don't think there would be a huge difference in the product itself, right? Like, I think if it's something that I know people will like, right, then it's still going to be something cool, right? Because obviously if other people find it cool, then I probably will find it cool as well. I think the difference is that I won't have as much fun like working on it, like as a creator, if I know it's purely just because like I know there is a group of people that are going to purchase this. That feels very like industrial and like uncreative, right? And so I like to explore and like try stuff and like make something and keep making it, and like I don't know, it's just very free flowing creative process, and I feel like that would be a lot less free flowing creative. And I see that when I like take that last step. I think I've said it a lot, like polish, right? Where you take something from something with a bunch of like dials and stuff that's all like, I don't know, my dials are called like float 0 to float 10 sometimes, right? Like completely unconnected to something, and the polish step is going through and like putting labels on everything and like cleaning up any like code that I didn't use and like trying to optimize stuff more than I had, right? Like that step is, I would consider that like the biggest portion of work, right? Oh, and not to mention like creating like videos and resources for it, tutorials. I hate doing tutorials so much. Stuff like that. And so I don't enjoy like that part as much, right? Like when I sit down to do that, like I said, I consider it work, right? Whereas before that, like the stuff I do when I'm making it, I don't consider that work. Like I consider that like fun and just like playing around, messing around. And so I feel like, obviously without doing it, I can't know, but I feel like if I made something specifically for like to target a specific audience of, I know they're going to like this, but I don't necessarily like this or need this, I feel like I would just dread every second working on it. And hence I wouldn't end up making it probably.
Okay. So when making products like shader products for VRChat and Unity, are tutorials and that kind of back-end stuff pertinent to sales?
This is like a multi-layer question, I think. In terms of sales, I don't know. I think a lot of sales are made, and this is like my own opinion and viewpoint, just like general feel of things. A lot of sales are made purely based off of like, I want to call it like the money shot, right? Like the thing right in front of you, it looks cool. Oops. There we go. It looks cool, like, wow, that's cool, I want that type sales, right? What I think tutorials and like documentation stuff really plays into is like is this person actually going to take this thing that they just bought and use it? So I feel like sort of the rule in my head is, for every one person that comes and makes a support ticket and says like, hey, I'm having a problem, can I get help? 10 people didn't, right? 10 people just didn't end up uploading the avatar with that thing because they couldn't get it to work, right? And so I think tutorials help a lot in that. Like if you have a step-by-step guide, this is how to do it, this is what things do, that helps. At the same time, there's a certain level of like, you can't make the tutorial too step-by-step, because then you're gonna like bore anyone who knows what they're doing and just wants like the specific information. So you gotta like differentiate between like documentation and tutorials. So That's why, at least for like some of the stuff, I would write like written documentation. I've moved away from that because it's just very tedious, right? You got to go in and write out all the stuff. And so it's a mixed bag, a balancing act. Typically, I try to aim like a tutorial I make towards people who know Unity but don't know the specifics about the product that I'm selling them, right? So like, oh, you've got to move this specifically here, or like do this thing for it to work. I have seen, especially lately, much more prevalence in things like VRC Fury, right? Which makes things significantly easier. You just drag and drop. You might not even need a tutorial if it's like literally you drag the prefab onto your avatar and it's done, right? For shaders, I guess it depends. Stuff like the eye shaders need a specific mesh in your eyes, right? And so I made a tool for that. And that tool is like drag and drop your avatar into it, like spawn the meshes, set them up, like align them with your eyes, and click merge, and it like does it, right? Going through that process for someone who knows Unity, it's probably pretty simple. They need to know like the specifics of like, this is what the tool does, this is what you should do at this stage, but they don't need to know anything beyond that. For someone who's never used Unity before, that could be like an impossible boundary, right? And so I think it's very important to like have them, and it's something I'm constantly working on because, like I said, I have trouble making them is the better way to put it. Like I ramble a lot. I only now, like literally after releasing the Afterimage script, realize I should probably write a script for my tutorial, right? Not just try to like go into it blind. So it's definitely a learning process, I think, for me, and that's the case for a lot of stuff in the whole process. I've learned a lot just through trial and error. I've learned a lot like looking at how other people are doing things. For example, like a lot of my like product page design is inspired directly from Lindy, who I think most people know make a lot of cool prefabs. And so like it's such a amalgamation of different skills and stuff that I've learned over time.
Wow.
I don't even remember what the original question was.
You answered it very, very well. I asked you, how is instructions pertinent to your sales? And you answered it very well and gave me a really amazing answer. So I appreciate that. I only asked that question because sometimes you see some people who do put them in, some people who don't. I'm just kind of curious as to your opinion. Why should it be there? Should it not be there? And you did very well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, on a more pragmatic note, just having better tutorials cuts down on the amount of support tickets that I have to answer to. Right. But yeah.
So how many support tickets do you normally get?
Right after product launch, it's like nonstop. For mostly, so I should say it's like a mix, right? Because the structure I have with like my support channels is if you buy a product, you get a license key. If you come to me and like make a ticket with that key, I'll give you like roles for that product, right? And so you can go into the specific section of that product. Sometimes I have like in-dev versions of something. So like if I'm making an update for something, I might put like hey, this is just like a loose development version of it. If you want to try this new feature, do that. Although unfortunately recently I've had to stop doing that because Discord added like a weird forwarding feature, and so people could just forward the files out of that, and that's a whole mess, right? But so that's like some of the support tickets is just people saying, hey, here's my license key, please give me the role for this. Some of them are like questions that are like already answered in documentation, so it's easy to just point to the docs and say, hey, like you should check out this part of the video, or like look at this documentation bit. Afterimage specifically, the one that I just released, had a lot of support tickets for the fact that it was only compatible with the newest SDK because it used the new VRC constraints. And so a lot of people like didn't see the warning like in the product page and on the like the check or like the download page that said like, please use the new SDK, right? And so I got a lot of people saying like, oh, there's an error in my console, it isn't importing, right? So it's some of those. And then you do get like a good amount of people who have like found a bug or found this specific thing that like, oh, this didn't work with it, and I think it through, and I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if we can fix that here. Let's try to work around with it. So I'd say like, um, I don't have like good set like figures in front of me, but there's enough, right? Like maybe like 1 in every like 20 to 30 people who buy something at like a conservative estimate are going to make a support ticket, and then maybe 1 out of 10 of those support tickets will need to go into like an extended conversation or like hopping into a voice call even, because that's something like if you're buying something from me, like I want you to get your money's worth out of it, so I will absolutely, like if someone makes a support ticket, as long as I have time, I will hop in a support call. We will figure that out. We will get that working for your avatar, right? And I think a lot of that is just like over time you build up like a wealth of knowledge, and trying to share that knowledge with other people is almost impossible. You need to like be there and see their issue. And so that's like that's the case. Sometimes I just need to see it, and then I'll be like, okay, we can try this troubleshooting step, and let's see if it works. So
I'd say the fact that you're capable of explaining how to put the product together is quite just to someone who doesn't know is impressive. I remember hearing somewhere the test of someone's knowledge or mastery of a skill is not in the actions of the skill, but the ability to teach it. I believe, if I'm remembering that whole idea correctly.
yeah, I definitely say like I would agree with whoever said that, right? Like it's trying to teach something. It really makes you think, and you've got to think through like step by step how to explain this to someone in a way that like they can understand without the huge breadth of knowledge that you might have behind it, right? So like I can give someone a 60-second explanation on shaders, and chances are I get it wrong or like they don't understand because I'm pulling on so much pre-knowledge that I need to break it down to the point where like they can actually understand it. Given like a few hours to think through, maybe I could come up with a good 60-second explanation, but like it's very well, I guess like depends how deep you want to go with the question. But in terms of explaining something to someone, I say there are 2 types of support that you can give to someone. One is explanation support, which is where you're actually going through and like teaching them how to like do this thing and why you need to do each step. Typically, I do that more with like if someone has an issue and they like post about it. There's a lot of great like Discord communities that let you just like post, hey, I'm having this avatar problem, right? The one that comes to mind is VR Labs because there are a lot of people that post stuff in there. But other ones I've heard about, I can't think off the top of my head all of them. Like if I see a question in there and it's something where it's like, I know the answer, but I know that like you're sort of given 2 choices. You either just give them the answer directly, or you help them learn why the answer is that way, right? And some people really just want like the answer and they're happy to just take the answer, and some people want to learn like why it is that way, right? And so for most support tickets, I'd say it tends to lean closer to like the just give them the answer, right? But when I like respond to questions or like people having issues with something that is like just say, hey, I've run into this issue, typically I lean towards more the like explain every step and try to lead them, like the whole like lead them to water, can't force them to drink type deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that aspect of like the customer service of your hobby? Do you mind it? Is it something you enjoy? It's something you don't enjoy?
So it's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone around like a peripheral issue of this the other day. I think it's something that I enjoy in moderation when it like respects my boundaries, right? So like recently I ended up just like closing my DMs on Discord because I was getting a lot of direct DMs about stuff related to products when I would prefer people to like actually make a ticket in the server, which like I have on the server like, hey, please make a ticket, right? Because it's better for me in that I don't lose tickets. I would do that a lot. If people just DM me, I'd like see it. And then once I click off it, notification's gone. Doesn't exist anymore, right? 2, it's good for like record keeping, right? Because I like to know like oh, I've talked to this person about this thing, and if that thing comes up again, I know where I've already solved this. I can easily like give the next person that information. But also, and like the last bit, like it sort of puts up some boundaries around like my personal time. Like when I click on my server, like I'm in work mode now, right? Like I'm doing support for something, right? When I'm clicked out of my server, I'm in, or like in my DMs, I'm in like my friend zone, right? That's where my friends come in and DM me and say hi, right? Like, so there's some level of like separation of like work and play, right? I would say like I don't mind it. I really enjoy like answering people's like support tickets. It's really cool to going flying. It's really cool to like meet people and like talk to people that have enjoyed something that you made. Like that's a unique experience. And yeah, like overall I'd say it's a positive. I don't mind it too much. Like if you were to ask like, oh, would you like do this again? If you could like start all over, would you do this the same way? Absolutely. Like it's been a blast.
So I'm going to ask you another question as well. What have been some of your favorite responses from fans of your project that you've seen? And did you expect that kind of response from people when you got into it?
Yeah, I think like I would struggle to pick out a specific case, but just people that show me really, really cool stuff. Actually, I can pick out a specific case. Actually, two. With the recent After Image thing I installed, or I released, someone tweeted a video of them doing like a dance, and it like kicks in midway. It looks really cool. I was like, wow, that's really amazing. I never thought of like using it like that. They've got like super wide outlines on it, and it looks like really good, right? And then sort of to go with that same product, someone sent me a video in a support ticket of like an avatar they were working on that just looked like super cool, right? So I think like I most enjoy people like taking something and making something more of it, right? And what the product enabled them to do, like even beyond just what the product is itself. And then it is always nice to like meet people out in the wild who are like, wait, I know you, you're Zekk, you made that thing that I enjoy, right? That's cool. But yeah, like I guess that's the best way I could answer it.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you another question, harping back to something you said way back in the beginning, but I'm kind of curious, what kinds of projects do you have on the back burner that aren't released yet? And what are some of your favorites from that little collection of stuff?
Oh my, I have a lot of stuff on the back burner, and like some of them I promised that I would release to like specific people like 6 times by now, and I've never gotten around to it. So actually, a great example is like the outline that I use here with the rainbow like flickery outlines. This was something that I had made like I want to say it's got to be a year ago now, and I had intended to release that at some point. Specifically as like a Poyomi module. With Poyomi Pro, you can like add modules and stuff. So I had intended to release that. Never got around to it. And there's another like 3 effects, one of which is like a polygonal effect that runs down your avatar. Let me see if I can find that really quick. I actually have avatars of these.
Oh, wow.
I can find them. Yep. I think this one's it. Yeah. Like this type of effect.
Oh, that is sick.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
And then the last is on the hologram avatar. Oop, I got an error bot. I'm not sure if I'm visible to you.
You are visible, but you're a bit broken.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, you're getting down to my height. You keep playing or you'll be on the floor.
Let's see if this.
You look like you're a bit of a pretzel.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Oh.
So I was working on this looks to be like an older version of it, but I was working on like a lightning effect that is sort of in the same vein of like on your avatar. And so those like I just never got around to fully finishing. I wanted to release them like together. So that's another like point against me, right? Is I've got like 3 things that I need to polish together, and so that ends up making me put it off. But soon TM.
Soon TM.
Eventually.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Sometime this millennia.
I can only imagine organization it takes to go through that backlog. I could say with podcast episodes, it's very easy to lose projects. I can only imagine with what you do, how easy it is. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I did a thing. It's somewhere in here. Let's go. Oh, look, it's a labyrinth of folders. Which one of these is it in?
Yeah, in terms of like actual organization, my organization has definitely fallen off a bit, especially as like when I used to use this avatar for like absolutely everything, and lately I've started to use other avatars, and so I made projects for those avatars. And like when I work on stuff, typically I have the idea and I just like want to get into it and want to put it on like my latest model that I've been messing with. And so I'll end up putting it in that folder structure instead of like my main one that's with this project. And so now it's all a mess. But I'd say 99% of my stuff ends up in MISC, and then later I'll put it like where it's supposed to go. But yeah.
I have this funny system of hyper organizing with folders. This is the 2024 folder. Here are the project types in here, and each one of those is another type. And I sometimes forget which one of those folders I put a project in, and it's kind of funny. So I understand the whole
Yeah.
misc and putting things places.
Mhm.
So
Luckily, Unity has a good search, so you can just search for it.
indeed. Now I'm going to ask about the latest project that maybe this released, or be released by the time this get out, or at a later date. What brought that project about? Because I saw the video and it looked amazing. I'm gonna be honest, the whole foot thing platforms up under the feet, and it looked really dope.
I think it's sort of weird. I think I was like walking, trying to pinpoint an exact like time and date. Literally, I was like walking down like my hallway, right? And I just had this thought, like it would be cool if I could like move something up to your foot, right? And so first I was thinking like magic circles. But I've seen that before, and that was like, it looks cool, but it also looks like a little bit destroying. And then I was like, wait, like what about like earthbending, like pillars that come up, right? Similar like Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like another inspiration was like Big Hero 6 with the little bots, right, that grow to build like a structure. And so that was like the moment I was like, okay, that sounds cool. I'm gonna do it. I did not expect it to go over as well on Twitter as it did. I sort of expected it to be like a, oh, that's cool, but not like a explodes into like something that everyone's now like pestering me about. Like, please release. So I mean, I can't be mad about it. Like that's that's cool, but the yeah, it was just like a spur of the moment. Like I'd consider those like shower thoughts, right, where you're just like daydreaming, thinking about stuff.
Okay.
um,
Well, I do have a question about the product as well. The item that we're talking about. When you move your foot up, does it only stay where your foot is, or could you use that as a way to push yourself higher than you were before, as a way of climbing?
yeah, so unfortunately, it doesn't like. There's no. Oh, now you've. I've just been nerd sniped. That's what I consider it when like someone asks me a question that makes me think, huh, maybe that is possible, right? Um, it doesn't like. It doesn't let you like push yourself off of it. One that would be like a bit of a feedback loop, right? Like you would have to lock it in place, I guess, and then stand on it. But I don't think there's any good way that I could do that. It's mainly intended for people like play space moving around, for it to like support them up there, right? But now that I think of it, like I could put like a flight collider on it, right? And then people could fly around with it supporting them. That's something maybe.
Sorry, it was one of the things I thought about when I saw the video. It's like, can you do that, or is it just a way to fill the gaps?
Mhm.
I was just kind of curious. That's why. So I wasn't trying to get
just a
nerd
way to fill
snipe
the
you, or
gaps for now.
you should do blah. I was just
No, nerd snipes are very good. Nerd snipes are how I've had some of like my best revelations with certain stuff, right? Where someone asks for a feature and I'm like, yeah, no, that's not. Wait a second, that's definitely possible, right?
okay. So with
Yeah.
with the platforms, what was the development process like after you had your shower thoughts, like what if, and then you started making it? How does it work?
Yeah, so in terms of like actually putting it together, it only like the first iteration, and this is I think this is part of why I enjoy like everything leading up to polish. The first iteration was just make a platform. I already had messed with a project like a while back for doing like by default each triangle doesn't know that it's like part of a hexagon, right? And so it wouldn't move together. So I had made a project a while back for like baking some of that information in Blender so that each triangle knows like, oh, my hexagon is like this hexagon, right? And then I can move them up as a whole hexagon, right? So I already had that, so I just like put that in, and it took me like a few hours to get like a working prototype example, which was the first thing I tweeted out. And then past that, like it's sort of figuring out all like the little edge case issues. So like it because it sort of once you want it to like move with you and stuff, it has to like snap to the world. So it like moves in increments as like you move around rather than moving smoothly, because if it moves smoothly then like as you move your foot it would like move forward with your foot and it would look weird instead of like coming up to meet your foot. Um, People started asking about like the first version I made was a like purely just like unlit, just had lines that like came up, made the shape. I got a lot of questions about like doing textures with it, like rock textures and stuff like that. And doing that means that it has to be like a lit shader, right? So you've got unlit, which is just outputs a color, doesn't care about lighting or environment, right? And then lit, which takes into account like the lighting and shadows and stuff like that. Making a lit shader from scratch is definitely like possible, but it's a lot of like edge cases and work and like not exactly fun. There's a reason why like everyone uses like one of four big shaders, right? Poiomi, Iltune, Orals, like those are like the big tune shaders because like they figured out everything, all the edge cases work, and they're super feature packed, right? So I opted to do it using Unity. Actually has like a shader type called surface shaders, which have like all the lighting sort of like pre-done for you almost. But in exchange, like there are a specific set of rules that you almost have to follow, right? Like there's specific ways that you have to write your shader. So I had never worked with surface shaders before, like that specific like surf shader type that Unity gives us. So there was learning that. That wasn't like too difficult to learn, but there's a bunch of like specifics that make it annoying, and then like battling bugs. There's one particular bug. I'm not going to nerd out and get too in depth with it, but there's one particular bug that like floored me for a good like probably 5 hours just trying to get it to work. And eventually I found like a forum post in like the bottom of the dumpster of the Unity forums that had the answer that was like, yeah, this is like been a bug for years and this is how you get around it. Um, and so it's like stuff like that. So yeah, the process like starts really smooth, starts fun, and then slowly over time you get into like the bits that I consider work, right? Like the polish. But I'm really happy where it is at this point. I still have like some work left to do on it, but like it's approaching release, which is good.
Okay. So I do have a question for you as well. It's getting sort of related, but it's a question on what somebody said. You said there are two different types, lit and unlit. Is there any performance differences between the two lit and unlit shader types?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I won't go too deep into it, but there's a lot of performance difference between lit and unlit in terms of like you could easily make an unlit shader like way worse than a lit shader, right? Like obviously there are extra calculations to take into account, stuff like lighting. You need more than one like pass, like it renders your object more than once for certain things, right? And so like when people talk about like materials and like minimizing materials and draw calls, that's already taking into account that each material has like multiple passes on it. So you're depending on what shader and how many passes it has, like it can be worse. But in performance, like generally if you're just to take a default unlit shader right next to a default lit shader, the lit shader, like of course I haven't like benchmarked this, but the lit shader is probably going to be worse in performance costs.
Okay. Now, with everything we've talked about and all the projects in the background, what have been some of the hardest and things for you to learn or problems you've come across that you've solved?
hmm So I think like when I first started learning shader stuff, it's a very different like way of programming. It's I would consider it like the word I've used before is like backwards, right? You have to think like on a very parallel scale. Like every pixel does something each frame, and so like it's a little bit messy for someone who came from a like purely like linear programming. Like everything happens one after the other. You can access like information from any data you have, you can access, right? Most of the time. Very different in Shaderland. Some I think now the biggest limitations I come up against are performance limitations. Like I've gotten to the point where if I want to make something, I can think it through and typically figure out like how it works. Or if I see like a paper on like because some of this is like nerd stuff, like digging through like research papers and articles and stuff. If I see a paper on a technique and it's possible, like I'm pretty confident in figuring out how to do it. If it's possible for VRChat, and that sort of gets into like the one like restrictive thing, and like the thing that's probably the hardest is figuring out, is this something I can do in VRChat with the tools we have available. So there are like one of the biggest limitations for avatar effects is lack of blit, right? Blit lets us copy like screen information into a texture and use it in a shader. Or it's like similar to that, right? You can use screen information in a shader. So we have cameras, which can do something similar. We have these things called custom render textures, which let us like run a shader on a texture, right? And then we have grab pass, right, which lets us take the whole screen and copy it into a texture that we can sample later, right? All of these are pretty performance heavy, right? And when you start getting into like some of the cooler algorithms, stuff that happens like over multiple frames, you start needing to use more and more of these like things that happen and like are super expensive to grab the screen and do stuff like that, right? Other stuff like getting object positions, like I said, the hologram just uses a point light or a camera or the root bone, right? All three of those have trade-offs. Things that like they do well and other things that they don't do well, and like performance implications, right? Like having a real-time point light on your avatar at all times, not amazing, right? There's a reason why we're allowed like one light for a poor avatar, right? Having a camera is a little bit better because like you have to actually turn someone's avatar on like explicitly, like click the little like eye icon for them to show. But it's still like performance impact, right? And so like the restriction now, a lot of it has to do with performance, I think. So for example, like the platform I showed, right now it uses two cameras because they can be used to get position in space, where you like point a camera at a quad, and all that quad does in the shader is just return its position, right? And then you can like read that in a shader. And so like that's two cameras. That's like not great, right? And so I'm trying to like figure out ways to bring that down, right? So like I have an idea, and I've done this before for something different, where I can like use only one camera and get both positions, right? But then comes the question of like, is it worth it? Will it make the process harder on like the end user? Like, will it implement it or like create any bugs that have to be solved, right? So it's a lot of like performance related stuff. I just recently made like two really cool effects. One I haven't posted yet. The other one is like difference of Gaussians, which is a cool like line or like edge detection algorithm that can see like differences in shading, right? And figure out where like the biggest I'm butchering this, like it figures out like edges, right, for color, and it looks really cool, right? I can swap into the avatar actually. Looks like this.
Oh,
Let me know when I'm loaded.
you're loaded. Wow, that's a very beautiful avatar.
And so it gives like this two-tone Amori effect, right? Is how I've ever heard it described. Really cool. Like I love this effect, but to do it, I need to like literally do like 5 grab passes, right? Grab the screen. Difference of Gaussians is what it says on the tin. Gaussian blur is like a way to blur images, right? And so to do that efficiently in real time, you need 2 passes, right? So you grab the screen, you blur in one direction, you grab the screen again, you blur in the other direction. And to do difference Gaussians, you need to do that twice at different kernel sizes. So you blur like more. So you grab the fresh like screen cap again, you blur more, you blur in the other direction more, and then you can take the difference of the two to get like these nice outlines. But the cost of doing 5 grab passes is a lot, right? Like this isn't an avatar that I can or I would like want to use in a world that has more than like a handful of people, right? I'd say like 10 to 20. I did some performance like benchmarking, and it's better than I thought, but still like not amazing, right? And so that's like one of the limitations now, is performance and like figuring out if something is viable.
Okay. So what kinds of things would need to change either in tech or VRChat to make performance and that be less of a problem? Hello, we're here to interrupt the most interesting thing being said in our current video to ask you a favor, which is, would you mind joining us at any of the socials we have, such as Discord? We're hanging out all the time playing video games, so you can catch us there very frequently. We have I run Twitter for us, which is LionTurtle21 on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. It'll always be Twitter. But either way, there's that. We also have a Patreon, which we actually have a whole other show for our Patreon members, which are Aliquum and the newest addition to the bunch, Future Oracle,
Niche, and Forbidden Zero. Good friends of ours.
Yeah, thank you very much, you guys, for joining. It means a whole lot that you're there, and hope to see you there as well. We have a whole other show. There are some free ones we have released as well for the audio for you to listen to and to see what it's like. It's like a whole other show as a thank you. With that said, please enjoy the rest of your podcast on YouTube.
So I think there are a few things that VRChat could do. A lot of it is restrictions that like are just general performance restrictions, like hardware stuff, right? I would say like if we got avatar blit or like a way to do blit on avatars that wasn't what we have right now, like blit itself, there was an implementation done by some people in the VRChat shader community for like what a blit component might look like, and it was significantly faster, right? So like that would take down some of that performance impact. I don't know how much, but I think it would be pretty significant. One thing that like I do think would be really cool, someone made a candy for it, is like being able to get a transform position and pass it into the shader. So like I said, right now we're using hacks like having like a point light or like a camera that looks at a quad, right? When there exists like with a script, I could literally in like one line of code make a object like return its position into a shader like vector for, right? Now, obviously it's not that simple, right? I think a lot of people like oversimplify the work that like VRChat puts in to like even make this place possible, right? Like it's not just as simple as, oh, just like one line script, it's done, right? It wouldn't be that simple, right? But it would be really cool if something like that existed, because it would simplify things. It would mean that like doing any effects, like there's some cool shading in games like Genshin Impact that use like getting the position relative to the head, which just like we can do it now, but it requires like replacing our like head root bone, and that can mess up other stuff. So like it's it's a very it's very interesting like space. There's a lot of stuff that could happen, but is it realistic? Like first of all, like shader creators probably make up like a tiny fraction of the people who play the game. So is a new feature that only benefits them or lets them do some like set of niche things like that important to the state of the game, right? Stuff like that. So I think there's a mix of like being realistic about it, but also like it would be cool.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Well, sometimes, though, the smallest of changes could also bring a lot of joy to a lot of other people. Like, imagine the things people such as yourself could do if that transform was there there to use. I'm sure, like we've seen in many occasions within VRChat, little things change and then people use it and bend it to their own will and create other things with it just because it's there. So just because a small portion of people can use it doesn't mean everyone can't enjoy it.
That's true, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, I would like to see. I just enjoy seeing people such yourself build things, and I enjoy asking questions like that just to pick your brain. That's all this is in general. And in order to pick another question, pick your brain. Now that I think about it, what specifically is that transform you mentioned, and how does cameras and the workaround hacks do the same thing? Because I don't understand that.
Okay. Let me think about this. So, like, in the shader, right? The shader has limited information about anything that isn't, like, itself, right? So in the shader, you can get all the vertex positions, right? Okay. Shaders are stateless, right? So every frame, they know nothing about the previous frame, and they know nothing about other pixels or vertices around them broadly. So you basically are, it's like pushing information through a sieve, right? And some information comes out the other end, which is the color, right? So all your vertices go in, some external information, like when you like change settings, like the colors in the inspector, that's external information that's fixed into like information that the shader can access, right? So basically, right now we use a point light, right? When doing shading, you need to know where the light is in the world, right? To like create like the lighting, right? So like you need to know that like, oh, the light is like up there, so that I can make shadows happen on this side and light happen on that side, for example, in a very basic sense. And so to do that, you need to be able to get the position of the light. And Unity does that for us by giving us a accessible variable that returns the world space position of a specific subset of lights in the world. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but it gives you the world space position of those lights. There's some restrictions around it, how you need to set it up, but most importantly, when you have a light in the world, it isn't just returning that information to your shader, right? Like every other like avatar around you has that light shining onto them, right? And their like meshes and stuff need to calculate lighting for that light. So it can be performance heavy, right? And so that world space position, which I realize I didn't explain what world space position is, like, think of like a point in space, right? For example, like, you've got like your houses, right? Here's a good example. Real life, you've got the globe, right?
Yep.
We'll call that the world space. So you know where your house is on the globe, right?
Yeah.
But if you were to tell someone where your house is relative to like the nearest hospital, let's say, right? That's your house's local space position to that hospital, right? So if you know where the hospital is in world space, and you know where your house is locally to that hospital, you can figure out where your house is, right? Even if you don't know the world space position of where your house is, right?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the idea, is like a literal point in space in the world that we like exist in. So like right now I exist in a world space position that like it exists as a set of values, XYZ values, right? And so having that information in the shader means that I could like take one vertex, right, and have it on the palm of my hand, and have another vertex that exists at that like world space position of the light, and connect them with a line, let's say, right? And so that lets me like move my hand and it still connects to the light, move the light and it still connects to my hand, right? Because both objects are like tracked, right? They share information. And so with lights, we can do that. With a camera, so like in the shader, the object knows the position of itself, right? it doesn't know the position of like something else. So we need to give it that information. So a quad, right, which is just like a single, like two triangles, right, can output as a color its like world space position, right? And then a camera can look at that quad and like write it into a texture. So like a texture that would go on like anyone's avatar, right? And then another shader can read that texture and get that information. So it's like we're doing a bit of a deep dive here, right? But basically you can like transmit information as color using a camera written to a texture.
Okay.
And so that's like a bit of a hack for that. So it's like those hacks cost performance because like lights are expensive. Like I said, cameras are expensive. They have to render the world, right? Whereas if we just had an object or like a component, right? Like a fizzbone is an example of a component, right? If you had a component that read its 3 transform values, right? X, Y, Z, and just drove some like shader properties, right? So like you would set the color in the inspector, it just drives a value like that. Then we can use those values really easily by just like we can when you set the color. One thing I will say, I don't know the actual like comparison in performance, but I do feel like it would be more performant, right? I feel like it would be significantly more performant, and it would make things easier, right? Like right now, lights have a vaguely a 4 light restriction because of how Unity returns like lights and how many lights it returns. Cameras are unlimited, but like I said, they're very expensive, so you're sort of out of luck.
So I'm gonna try and regurgitate what you said in a way because my smooth brain can understand. So using the metaphor of the house again. So the transfix that you mentioned is the exact destination data like XYZ that is easily accessible by knowing X, Y, and Z based on the component. And a camera is like looking at your house, giving you that data. So you have to go to the camera to get that, to look at the object and get that data. If I'm understanding that correct.
Yeah, so like imagine your house glows with its longitudinal and like your house glows with its XYZ position relative to the world, right? And the camera like looks at it and says, "Hey, I'm going to write this to a texture that another shader then samples, and like now it knows what your house's location is."
Okay, I understand. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sorry I had to go down that little
got very into
dive.
the weeds.
I personally don't mind it. That's how we learn things, but I didn't know if you wanted to go into that whole explanation of this is how these things work.
Yeah, I would say like I'm struggling to recommend a resource for this for someone who like wants to like figure this out more. There are like the shader knowledge repo, which I talked about before, has an explanation of at least the point light version of this, how to get like location from point light. And I think they have an explanation on the camera one, but I'm not sure. So that's a good like resource for learning about that.
Okay. So I have a question for you as well, kind of more of a general weird VR versus non-VR programming question. How is developing things for VR in mind with shaders and coding different from how you would outside of a VR headset?
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's very different when it comes to graphics. With shaders in particular, I'm not really sure. I don't do a lot of like VR programming, right? So I've never made like my own VR game or anything like that. And I'm sure people who do that could point to like a ton of differences, right? But in terms of, or there's one, I'll get to that later. In terms of like direct visuals, the shader like has to render to both eyes, right? So if you close one eye and then like open the other, you'll see that your eyes actually get like different images, right? And that has to do with like stereoscopic like views and like how Unity like presents that to your eyes, right? And so there's some shenanigans that have to do with like sometimes you can have an avatar that like, or have a shader that does something different in one eye than it does in the other because of some like math that you're using, and you have to like resolve that. Otherwise it looks super cursed. So a great example of that actually, like in action, is someone made an avatar that's just a circle, and it returns blue in one eye and yellow in the other, and it's like horrible to look at. Like your eyes just do not like that. It's like really bad. And so sometimes you get that unintended, right? Like that person intended to make it look like that, but sometimes you get that without intending to. In terms of like the other end of like VR game design stuff, something came to mind, which is like we have no pre-programmed animations or anything like that in VRChat. Like I can just reach over and do whatever I want. I can contort myself in all sorts of positions, right? So when you look at someone who's making like prefabs, like a gun prefab, right? In a video game, like you've got your gun prefab, you shoot your gun, you move your character's arms up like to flinch or like to make a reaction to the gunshot, right? It looks really immersive, right? In VR, like you're limited in how you can do that, right? Like you can't force me to move my arms, or you can, but like it wouldn't be something that people would like, right? They want to like be able to pose and like do cool stuff with it, right? And so that leads to a level of like greater, like you've got to be careful and be like ingenuity, like bring some new thought into things on how you do things so that they look cool and feel cool. There's also an element of like every asset has to be a hero asset, right? And so that's like used in games a lot, where like your hero assets are like your main character and like your main props that you interact with directly, whereas non-hero assets can be like low poly, like background stuff that isn't a main focus, right? And the issue with that is like if I have an object in my hand and I can like see a seam on it, for example, I'm gonna see the seam eventually, right? Whereas if you look in video games and you have the eye for it, like after doing stuff for a while, you sort of get an eye for like looking for common mistakes and like common things that you see a lot. Almost every video game is like full of little mistakes and little imperfections, right? But you don't notice them in the grand scheme of the video game because all your hero assets are well, like high poly, like well made, right? And you don't notice stuff on them. But all the background stuff just fades out, right? Because it's just background stuff. Whereas almost anything, like any prop or anything like that, is a hero asset, right, in this land, right, in VRChat, because it's so like right up here for you, right? So that gun needs to be high poly, have lots of detail, have lots of, or like not necessarily high poly, but like be detailed, be like cool to look at, right? It can't just be a like flat, like uninteresting object, because it's going to be on like 16 enemies that come around a corner for 3 seconds before you like before you get rid of them, right? So that's one challenge, I'd say.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a very different subset of questions to be outside what we've been talking about, because I want to get to know you a little bit as well. What kinds of things do you enjoy doing inside of VRChat, and what are some of your favorite memories from the platform?
Yeah, so I'm definitely some people really like to like explore worlds. I'm sort of the opposite. I really like just like finding worlds that I like and then sticking with those, or like joining off my friends in whatever world they're in, right? So I'm definitely more of a like a chat enjoyer of the VR chat portion rather than a world enjoyer. So I like talking to people. I like obviously creating. We've talked about this a ton at this point. To like broadly, I'd say that I pretty much do two things, which is create, talk, or three things: create, talk, and sleep. I sleep a lot in VR, whether intended to or accidentally. I also go to some like club events, but mostly just to like the music is very like it sounds counterintuitive, but like soothing. Just let the music make my head buzz and be fun with that. Right. Okay. So yeah.
All right. And what are some of your favorite memories you've made in the platform so far?
Okay, favorite memories, like pointing to a specific time is hard. There's a few groups that I hang out with that like know that we've had some fantastic times, and like I don't think I could point to like a specific time. like nothing comes out to me as like, oh, that was like my favorite memory of all time. um,
Okay, that's fair.
yeah.
Now, last few questions before we start wrapping this up a bit, which is your name. Where does it come from, and why do you continue to use it?
So Zekk was it used to be something different, which um, along the same lines, which I'm not gonna say the full old one. Um, and eventually that evolved into like Zekk with 1K, and then when I came on to VRChat, Zekk with 1K obviously was taken, right? So I tried Zekk with 2Ks, that was taken. So I tried Zekk with 2Ks, and I actually used like a Cyrillic E, right? And so that was sort of how I got stuck with it. So it evolved from, and I'll just say it, like, it evolved from Pokemon, Zekrom, that Pokemon. Yeah, I realized that I could say the Pokemon without saying my full old username.
Okay. And the avatar that you're in, what makes you use it, and are there any special features about it that mean something to you?
Yeah, so I searched for like a long time trying to find an avatar that I enjoyed. And eventually I landed on this one. It's Mariana by Astrofluff. And I think above all else, like I was never a huge fan of like the really, really like e-girl, like super shiny, like avatars, but I also wasn't like a full-on like booth like anime style avatar in your, and this sort of like fell pretty squarely in the middle, probably a little bit more towards like the e-girl side. Um, and in terms of like why e-girl rather than e-boy, like there are countless examples of this where like there aren't a lot of good male avatars in VRChat. Please, someone fix this. Right. So I was looking for like something that wasn't quite like e-boy, but not quite like booth model, and like now on top of that there aren't a ton of good male avatars, so it's like a a double whammy for that, and so I ended up here, good compromise. um and then yeah, that's how I ended up with this avatar, and now I've started using some more models. I got a booth model recently that I enjoy. um
Alrighty. Well, again, ooh, suffering flag. Oh, I'm back. So, thank you very much for your time, Zekk. It's been an absolute honor to speak with you and get to learn all about you and the projects you've been working on and where they all come from. So, thank you for your time. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Really interesting. Sorry, I haven't said much, but it was too enthusing to interrupt you and listen to what you had to say. Because I don't know jack shit what you're talking about. So here we are. Old age sucks.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun coming on. Thank you for having me. I feel like I rambled quite a bit, but that's just how it goes sometimes.
Well, please don't apologize for rambling. We enjoy it. When people ramble or go
We
on
love it.
tangents is when we learn things. It's honestly one of my favorite things of what we do is listen to people ramble or go on tangents about niche things. It's how you learn things you wouldn't normally. So please don't apologize.
Yeah.
You know it.
So where can the audience find you or your work or anything like that if they wish to reach out and find you?
So almost everything I do is under zekk.dev. So all my links are under links.zekk.dev, and then my government is under shop.zekk.dev.
Alrighty. Well, everything you'll need to find Zekk or Zekk's work will be in the description right down that way, with a bunch of other fun links if you so choose. And before we pass this off to Raptor to close us out, we're going to ask you, the audience, a question. I'm going to make a wild guess and say you're a VRChat user or a VR user in general. So I'll ask you this. What are some of your favorite assets for VRChat or VR in general that you enjoy? Let us know what they are and why, and put everything down in the comment section. We'll love to hear all about it. And Raptor, as always, you know the thing.
Yeah, no matter what, folks, when you come into VR and you think you got this or that, and all of a sudden you notice that the lights are on and you got the shade in the background, look on the bright side. I wonder if the light's actually on or is it actually off? We'll talk to you later, folks. Have a good one. We'll see you later on the flip side.